You're a selfish bastard. You spend all day doing things. Work things, family things, community things. You're busy as hell, impacting people everywhere you go. But you're not making time for you. You know, that dude or dudette in the mirror who stares back at you pleadingly, begging for some relief. Maybe tomorrow, you think, as you run off to do more stuff, important stuff. People are counting on you. You are also counting on you. And it's pretty selfish of you to ignore that fact. Because the version of you that everyone else is getting is depleted, distracted, and drowning. How is that helpful? Today's guest on the DesuckifyWork Podcast, Katie McDonald, is here to help you nurture your soul so you can bring more joy, inspiration, and love to everyone around you. It starts by remembering that we are human beings first and foremost, not human doings. So, who do you want to be? Our relationship with ourselves will outlast all others. We must nurture it. We must confront our mortality and allow that awareness to lead us to more intentional choices, ones that align with who we truly are. We must stop seeing work as this other thing, separate from our real lives. It's all life. We can start to see this with a simple experiment. Stop keeping separate work and personal calendars. Put it all together and see the difference it makes in how you choose to spend your time. We must listen to Katie. She is wise and compassionate and brilliant. And here she is. Okay, Katie McDonald, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Oh, it's so fun to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I am excited for this conversation. I think we will get into some really good stuff, and I think it will be stuff that my audience really appreciates. So before we do that, let's give you a chance to just tell everyone who you are, what do you do for work, and how you came to be doing it.
So I'm Katie McDonald. I own a concierge coaching company called Be Nourished, and I'm a professional speaker. And I came to this work in self-care strategies because I was addicted to doing. I worked for Time Inc., selling advertising in 45 national publications. Mm-hmm. And I really sold more than ad pages. I sold my soul. I just nailed the human doing part, but the human being part eluded me. So I got sick. I had to get really, really sick. Ulcerative colitis, pneumonia, shingles, asthma, allergies, anxiety, depression. There were all these signs, of course, along the way, but I was too busy to pay attention and really resentful at any physical need that I might have, which felt like it was in competition to productivity.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, literally, this was a time before cell phones, so I'm dating myself, but literally not wanting to, driving from call to call and not wanting to drink water because that would mean I'd have to stop and go to the bathroom. So don't drink water. Yep. Never really taking a moment to say, water is actually important for us.
Kind of one of the foundations of life. Yes.
Yes. But to me, it was an obstacle. Taking care of myself was an obstacle because I wanted to get things done. And even though every book on my nightstand was about well-being and meditation and mindfulness and alternative health and essential oils, and I'm a hippie at heart. I knew all of this, but implementation is a whole nother thing from, the intellectual understanding versus implementation. So when I got sick, I had to shift into implementation. And now I am a pit bull about implementation because the rest is just brain candy unless we're really, really changing our lives through our habits.
It's a great term, brain candy. I think most of us probably can relate because I'm sure most of us have some books on our shelves that, while maybe were interesting to us intellectually at the time, we don't always embody them. We sort of, like you said, intellectualize them, agree with them. We go, yeah, that makes sense. I should do that. And then we go and do whatever we always do. So,
well, I've read that the research says that it actually tricks our brain into thinking we've done it.
I can believe that.
So there's biology working against us here in this case too. It's not like we're losers. We're human beings and we're wired in a way that is looking for an easy route, right? Our brains, we're survivors. And so we're looking for the easiest path. And somehow reading it makes us believe that we've actually accomplished it. I don't know, I can relate. I'm watching the Olympics and I'm like, wow, as if I've just done a pole vault or something.
Exactly. No, it's interesting. I mean, the Olympic thing makes me think of mirror neurons and things like that. And if we somehow can connect that way. And then the book thing is, I think intellectually we've solved the problem, right?
Yes.
If I just start meditating, so like it's done off the list. I don't need to worry about it anymore because the brain has solved it, even though the body isn't at all taking.
Hasn't caught up yet.
Yeah. So it's really fascinating. One of the things I'll want to explore a little later is that distinction between being a human doing and a human being. I think that the phrase "a human being" is so in our core that I think we don't actually pay attention to what it means, and that allows us to get into the state where we're simply doers and we're simply out there checking off our lists and doing all that stuff. So I want to dive into that a little bit, but I want to dig in a little more to your work history and ask a few more questions there. One of which I like to ask is, what role does work play in your life? It sounded like it played a certain role years ago. Where does it sit in your life now?
Oh, that's such a great question. I would say it was my identity. And this is what I hear all the time in my coaching practice, is that it is our identities. And boy, that makes us really vulnerable to any shifts over which we may or may not have control. I would say now, and this is so cliche, but when I recovered, I implemented the strategies that I now bring to my clients and to my audiences in speaking. And I had to figure it out while I was so impaired and compromised. And I vowed, like, I'm going back to my tribe of doers. These are my people. I understand them, and I'm going to help them learn how to be, because I had to figure it out when I was circling the drain. I had to put all these pieces together. And so I took what was passion. I mean, all the alternative well-being practices, nutrition, these were passions of mine. I mean, just fascinated by them. Like I said, take courses on them and everything. And all of a sudden it became my work. And what happened was I felt so grateful to be immersed in what I love. I was like, is this a thing? Are we allowed to do this? Like, I didn't know we were allowed to do it. But it also took away any life outside of work for me. Because all of a sudden, anytime I was in the kitchen or anytime I was, writing content, even if it was content I was fascinated about, all of a sudden I was working. If I read some article, I was like, oh, I've got to share this. I've got to bring this to audiences so I can disrupt our relationship with ourselves and disrupt and reframe what self-care is. And so I burned out. Even though I'm an expert in this, I burned out because I don't believe in balance. I don't think it exists, but I wasn't feeding my life outside of work when I had transplanted all my passions into my work. So I had to take some time out and say, okay, well, what does this look like now? How do I stay passionate about what I do, be passionate about this work and these topics, and still create some space for me to not be immersed in it all day long, 24/7. And that's where I am now. So I don't know a name for it yet. I don't know, but I'll think about that one. I don't think I could put it in a box, and maybe that shows my growth, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting area, and we'll definitely dive into this whole area as well. The quote unquote work-life balance, or I think, as you may describe it, more like work-life integration. And, and I think there's a lot of interesting things there. And I think a lot of us are trying to figure that out. Maybe not always successfully because we don't have the tools we need, or we don't realize we have the tools we need. But I think that notion of, particularly I think when you go to sort of do your own thing, and it is a thing you're very passionate about, it can be very easy for it to become all consuming because it's interesting and it's exciting, and you're brain is telling your body that this is fun. Let's do this.
Yes.
But yeah, that whatever the right term is, if it's not balance, whatever it is that, homeostasis or whatever that you need to have other facets of your life be paid attention to.
Yes.
That can get hard in that situation. And it can get hard when you're working for Time Inc. and you're selling ad space in a different way. And it can get hard in my world of, people who work in ad agencies where it is fun. It is really fun work. And that can keep you at the office till 1 a.m. because you want to crack that problem and you want to solve it and create a fun ad campaign. Like, of course you do. But then, if you have a family, do they even know you? And, if you have friends, do they ever see you and all that stuff? So I think it'll be fun to explore that. Yeah.
I think what I've discovered is that we don't think we can burn out from passion.
Yeah.
Like we don't, we think like, oh, I'm burned out because I don't like my work. And so many people come to me and talk to me after my speeches and say like, I'm just so exhausted, but I love what I do. And so they can't bring those two ideas together. And it's like, you can burn out from passion. Yeah. And that was a discovery that took some time for me to see even like just, wow, we're susceptible. And so I found the word I was listening to you, the word is enough. Yeah. That is like an elusive sweet spot of equilibrium. But what is enough is the question that I'm asking myself and my clients all day long. What is it? When have we done enough? When are we enough? And often when we don't feel like we are enough, we'll compensate by doing too much.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, I can relate to that. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because they're both great questions. When have we done enough? But I think it is so rooted in the when are we enough question, which on some level is sort of an unfair question to even ask. What does that even mean to be enough? Enough for whom? Like, what does that mean?
Who gets to decide?
Right. But yet we all feel it, right? I mean, our actions are all pointed towards, if I just do things, then I will suddenly be like who I want to be, so to speak. And there's never an opportunity to actually like say, I'm good. Yeah. I am enough, so to speak. And that's a hard one to wrangle. I don't know. I'm curious, when you are working with your clients, and it sounds like a lot of your clients are folks who are in this space of like, they've maybe defined themselves by doing. They don't quite know what being means, and they know, but somewhere in their core, they feel like they're not enough. How do people start to get to a place where they either realize that's the wrong question, or at least they realize I'm enough already. Now what? Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I don't think people come saying they don't feel like they're enough. They're just like, I can't keep doing this. I just, we can never outrun our pain through busyness. I tried, right? It doesn't work. And I think, the sense is like, I don't have it in me anymore. And that's why the majority of my clients are approaching 40 or on the other side of 40, because we've borrowed all our future energy. We have this huge credit card bill of future energy that we borrowed because the energy wasn't coming from exceptional habits. It wasn't coming from boundaries and our ability to say no to anybody else but ourselves, right? It was just, we kept saying, oh, well, I'm just push harder, keep going. And we're continually withdrawing from that future energy. And at some point the bill comes due. So I don't think we really fully, come with that sense of awareness. I think it's just depletion. It's just like, this isn't working. All the things I used to do to keep this whole circus going, it's not working anymore, or I'm not working anymore. The symptoms start showing up because the body is saying like, yoo-hoo, like take the elevator down. We live neck up, right? Take the elevator down. And so our body starts creating symptoms. It starts creating these interruptions to our productivity, because that's how it's going to, if you want to get an attention of a doer, you disrupt their ability to do. And that's what happened. That was the only thing that stopped me, was I literally could not do it anymore. I missed, TJ, one meeting. And that's when I knew it fell apart. I was over, like sheer will and pride, like determination to protect my hard-earned reputation could not propel me forward. I couldn't do it anymore. And I knew like, I know there's no have it all together club, but the illusion of the have it all together club, like I was kicked out. Like I was like, I have now revealed a crack in this delusion that I held for myself. And I think the rest of the world, our society in particular, holds. And it's like, I didn't know how to live like that. And I had suicidal ideation because I was like, this isn't living. If I'm not doing, I'm not living.
Wow.
So what now, you know? Yeah. And I just had hip surgery and then foot reconstruction surgery this past year. And I was immobile for 9 months in total. Oh, wow. I'm still the doer, like, right? So you like pull that out and life's going to keep doing that until we get the message. It's like, wow, can I contribute when I'm so, when like my existence is compromised? Like, am I still a valuable? And the answer is yes. We have a birthright to take care of ourselves. We have a responsibility to take care of ourselves because without that, what's happening is we're bringing a compromised version of ourselves to the world. And I know, we've never needed a more evolved version of ourselves than we need now.
Yes.
So it's our duty to take care of ourselves and to be the most thoughtful, intentional version of ourselves. But that takes a curiosity about ourselves. And most of us are far more invested in the postured lives of strangers on social media and the perceptions that we have about everybody else and what should be than we are curious about ourselves.
That's a great point. And it's an interesting point because I think about the work of coaching, and I do coaching as well. And, I'll often talk to people who are curious about the work I do. And I say, I really love when you get to dig into that self-awareness with a client and really help them see what's going on and help people see that a lot of the challenges are rooted here more so than out here. But it can be really hard to put that message in front of somebody when they're not ready for it, right? Yeah. Because the illusion in front of us is that the world is crazy and it's hurting me. And there's truth to that. The world is pretty crazy. But it sort of strips away our agency if we just constantly put it in this space of it's all happening out there.
That's right.
How do you find that people are able to start to see that, if I start to get more curious inwardly, that this will lead me towards where I need to be? How does that transition happen?
Well, it's funny. I think one of the homework assignments that I give my clients in my 6-month program is have a cup of tea. I actually have a blend of tea that I created that addresses so many of some of the issues that I see emotionally and physically. And it has lavender for calming, peppermint for energy, but also good digestion. So it's designed for that purpose. Yeah. But I will, my clients, as we've already established, are high achievers, as are yours. And what happens is when I ask them to give, to do this one homework assignment, it is the one they blow off with such shocking, laughing regularity. It is hysterical because everything else is done, right. Like they are good girls and boys. They like to get their, they're investing a lot of money. Right. They're all in. Yep. And then this one thing, yeah, that one. Yeah. It is like avoidant. We are avoidant. Funny. We're terrified of being in our own company. That's the core of busyness. If we slow down, we might actually slow down enough to see our own reflection, and we might not like what we see.
Yeah. Yeah. God, between busyness and our cell phone addictions,
yes.
There's not a lot of time spent with ourselves truly anymore. I think, I think back to the pre-cell phone, pre-smartphone for sure days. And, I'm not saying it was some perfect panacea, but you were sometimes at least forced to confront your aloneness, yes. And for some people that meant maybe they just went out and did more things, or they ran errands or whatever. But at some point, maybe you were at least a little bored. And therefore you were like, what's that? Where now it's so easy to never look within. And I love the thing about the tea. I mean, I sort of hate it, I'm sad about it, but like, I get it because it's like, you give me other things to do, sort of quote unquote homework, it's like I'm filling out forms and I'm typing in stuff and I'm like, that's what we're used to doing.
Yes,
right. And it is like, even if it's about myself, like somehow I can treat it like an assignment.
Yes.
Whereas sitting, drinking a cup of tea, even making a cup of tea where it has
it starts from the making, right? From the decision, I'm going to do it. Yes.
Yeah. Like, so all of that is just time with your thoughts. And I think there is
but
that
it's
fear.
the senses too, TJ. That's what I'm trying to get us back in our bodies, right? So it is a sensual experience. One of the ways that we can feel whole again, instead of decapitated, right, is to awaken our senses. And from the moment you boil that water and you hear, you see the steam and you hear the bubbling of the water and you smell the tea bean and you're holding it and you've got the warmth and the taste, like you are becoming a human being again because we are inhabiting our bodies in a way that we often don't and avoid. Yeah.
It's such an interesting concept on some level because I'll be honest, I spend a fairly large percent of my time up here. And I would say lately, and by lately, I mean maybe in the last couple of years since I really went all in on being a coach, and I've had some learning experiences that talk about some of what you're talking about. Yeah. And then even, our previous conversation got me thinking about this more. Like the idea of being in our bodies, like on some level, my brain can't even process that. Like I don't really, and then I'll try it and I'll be like, okay, what am I feeling? And it's hard. Like, all right, I'm feeling a little tightness in my stomach. Now, what do I do with that? So how do you help people? I mean, it sounds like the tea thing is meant to sort of start to get you at least used to the idea of like noticing what you're smelling and noticing the heat of the cup as you touch it and as you taste it and feel it. Like, so I think I can help. I appreciate the practicalness of that. How do you kind of continue to evolve that awareness with your clients?
Yeah, so there are so many tools. I mean, I've been doing this for decades and my toolkit is really abundant and my job is to go through it and pull out one. But one of my favorite things to do is either add a habit or remove a habit for a 2-week period. So I see my clients in 2-week intervals. So I might say, okay, because when we remove it or we add it, we're focused on it. We're aware of how is this impacting me? So I might have a client get off alcohol for 2 weeks. Yeah. Like anybody can do anything for 2 weeks, right? I'm not talking about somebody that's an alcoholic. That's a different conversation, right? Sure. But like get off alcohol or get off social media for 2 weeks. And the panic that it's fascinating. Yeah. And because I teach my clients to observe themselves. So I was like, this is for the next 6 months, this is an experiment. You are attending university and you are going to study yourself. I'll often use like, okay, you're TJ Inc. You know how to study your business. So we're going to study the business because, oh, by the way, you are your business. Right. So all of these things, looking at these habits, for the next, I had one scenario where very, high level senior position was just working all hours. Her staff was trying to keep up with her. She was setting a standard that was killing her. I mean, she was really struggling and she was role modeling it and her team was falling by, like flies. And so I actually said for the next 2 weeks, Monday through Friday, your office is closed at 5:30. Everyone is leaving at 5:30. And she's like, I can't. I mean, she just threw, excuse after excuse after excuse. And I was like, this is 2 weeks. Like, are you in or are you out? Like, this is 2 weeks. Yeah. And this is tough love. But, I want to text every day at 5:30 when you are in your car and your entire team is doing it. And then on the last Friday, you guys are going to go out, all of you, and you're going to talk about what the experience was. And it was so uncomfortable for her. And yet it was the most she was just unshackled. She realized she was acting out what she thought was supposed to be. What does leadership look like? And yet the self-leadership was horrific. She was, she was martyring, right? She was a martyr, not a role model. And she had to disrupt all of it. And what happened was they all got to know each other and themselves better. They were healthier. They had more stamina. They took less sick days. Their productivity was through the roof because they had containment.
Yeah.
And they had enough. What is enough? Well, the enough is your day starts at 8 and it ends at 5:30. And that focus was enough to liberate them, to do better work, to do creative work, to break all the rules that were holding them captive to this model that didn't work.
Yeah.
And so they kept that going. There were exceptions, like when are the exceptions? And they wrote out a guide of like, this is when an exception might be, and outlined that and got everybody's buy-in. They are now, that department is the most sought after department because everyone wants to be on a caliber team like that is willing to break the rules, willing to write new ones, and to see each participant as a human being who has the right to a life outside of work.
Wow. It's amazing that like that even has to be said, like a right to a life outside of work. Like you have that. It's like, oh, of course we do. Like, it's just such a fascinating thing. There was a few terms you used in there that I also love. I mean, the martyr thing is, it's been modeled for so long. It's just so baked into almost every culture. And it's I'm so busy. Oh, I had to stay until whatever time last night. Like, it's almost like the cost of entry to a lot of companies to just like, you have to adopt that. So, and then I love the idea of sort of giving people the chance to experiment with a new way of being. And the term self-leadership also stood out to me because, I think when people use the term leadership, it's almost always other directed, which is understandable. That's the world we live in. But the idea of self-leadership, even just those words together as a concept, I think can shift the way you think about how you quote unquote lead yourself, because I think a lot of us don't lead ourselves. We allow ourselves to be just led by whatever was modeled before us. And then in the throes of all of that, I started wondering, a client like that, you tell them 5:30, that's the cutoff, and they're resisting. Is part of that exercise also like, where are you feeling that resistance and some of that? Like, I'm thinking about the body again, and I'm like, how does that, because it shows up eventually through the head of like, I can't do that because, right?
Yes.
But, like when we're told to do something that we really don't want to do, like, I imagine we feel it somewhere. Like, and what does knowing where you feel something open up to you?
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. It takes some time, that connection to the body. It takes time. And the way that I get to it is by these experiments. The beauty of an experimentation is, look, 2 weeks from now, we can decide something completely new, but now your choice is going to be an informed choice instead of a Pavlovian reaction. We're not, as you said, we're not leading our lives. We are reacting. And the person that, if we don't have an agenda, we are living out somebody else's. And that just pisses me off. When I think about that, I'm like, what? But it's true. Yeah. It's true. We are victims, and we are, just like we started this conversation, we are not intentionally crafting a life. We are reacting to what's happening outside of us and then feeling powerless. And that's because we haven't stepped into our power. So when we start disrupting these habits, it's like, oh yeah, I get to choose whether I drink or not whether I'm in a social situation where my boss is going to be expecting me to drink because that's what everybody does. And then I'm going to abandon myself. And then I'm going to feel like, I'm horrible in the morning, and I'm not going to be as productive. Like all of a sudden, like all these things, when we start challenging them to say, did you even sign on to this? Like, did you choose this? And then you get to choose it again. Yeah. Does it still work for you? Does it work for you at all? That's what I love. And when we say the experiment, we remind it, like, it's okay. 2 weeks from now, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
Whatever you want. Or I'll have a client say, okay, for the Monday through Friday, like we're going to do smoothies, and I'll give them a ton of recipes. Like I get granular. I am in their kitchen. I am in their lingerie drawer. Like I got to get in everywhere because most people aren't talking about this stuff. They're not talking about these basic, how do I manage myself kind of stuff. Right. Yeah. And so I'll say Monday through Friday, have your smoothie. And then Saturday and Sunday, I don't care what you have. Like, a mountain of pancakes. I don't care. But then ask yourself, how do I feel? See, this is how we get back into our body. How does it feel? And it's like, oh my God, I feel so gross. Like, oh, I feel so heavy. It's like, oh, okay. So you're telling me when you eat pancakes for breakfast, you feel like heavy and sluggish, and you don't go for the walk that you were going to do. And you don't feel like, oh, well, now that you have that knowledge, like, are you going to choose pancakes? And if you are, like, know what you signed up for. Like, if I'm going to eat this plate of pancakes, I've now decided that I am not going to be as productive. I'm going to be a little lethargic the rest of the day. I'm going to stay in my pajamas, or I'm just going to feel a little sluggish. And I've now made a choice. I have full agency in my life.
Yeah.
Right? Stay till 5:30 for the next 2 weeks. And then what worked and what didn't work? Where was it hard? Where's the rub? You know, it's about sandpaper. Like, this is, where's the friction? When we find the friction, we can soften the edges with the sandpaper, or we can like say, I don't want this friction. Like, I'm removing myself from this friction. I'm going to change my life in a way because this friction isn't going to soften. This doesn't feel good. This isn't in alignment. So we have to stop. I think we're just as addicted to busyness as we are about posturing about busyness.
Yeah.
And it's the farce exhausts us. Yeah. And when someone says, oh, I'm so busy, I used to be like, oh, they must be important. Now I'm like, wow, they have no idea how to set boundaries and priorities. Like, wow, I hope they come see me. Like that, that's literally my reaction now.
And I hope they come see you too, because I think people, we're just so unaware. It comes back to that we don't even see that. But the whole idea of choice in our lives, I think we're choosing, because like, like there is some little switch in our brain that says, I'm going to eat the pancakes, or I'm going to have the whatever. Like, at some point our brain did that, even if it was almost automatic. We might be aware of that, but like, we're not realizing sort of how conditioned we are to just flip that switch, and that we actually have the ability to preempt that sort of pseudo choice with a real choice that's actually based on, how does it make me feel to do this thing? Whether that's a diet thing, whether that's an action we take at work, whether that's who we have in our lives, as in our relationships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's comfortable to be on autopilot, and it's necessary to be on autopilot for certain things, but that's more like our automatic behaviors, like not the things that matter. And I think somehow we merge them all into an autopilot existence. And that's easier, even though eventually all the things you talked about, the physical symptoms, the things start to show up that tell us, okay, it's time to start making real choices. You know? But
even to slow down enough and ask ourselves, like, how do I feel when I eat that? Or how do I feel when I leave work at 8 o'clock at night? Like, and how does my body feel? How does my spirit feel? How are my relationships impacted? What is the impact on our future selves? I use a visual of a pause button, the 2 lines. And the first line is our present self. And the second line is our future self. And we need to pause enough to consult our future self, because our future self suffers the headache from the second cocktail, right? Our future selves feels, indignant as we squeeze ourselves into Spanx, or to get into our jeans, or, move up a notch on our belt, or we lose a promotion because, we didn't sleep well, and like our future selves paid that price. So our future selves need to have some say, because what we're doing is an investment, a deposit, or a withdrawal in our future selves. And I think what happens is, because we're racing, we don't stop and say, like, what's the impact of this choice? And that's why I like the experiment of a time period, a start end and an end, a start and an end, a really clear one for us to not be panicked that we're going to like lose something that means something to us. Like, it's just, this is an experiment, and then you get to choose. And that experiment gets us aware of like, what is it what role is this playing? I mean, another experiment is like, the answer is no to any request made of your time. And like, no is a complete sentence. So would you? No. And then run away before you fall, and like fall for it and like cave, because everyone else is so used to like barreling you over because you're a doormat. Like, run away before you fall, you fall for it. So this, no. And like, I have to, what they don't realize is how many times people are asking things of them because we teach people how to treat us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're like shocked. One of the shocks is, oh my gosh, how often people are asking me, and oh my gosh, I didn't know I had permission to say no.
Yeah.
And they're doing it because I say so, right? This is the nature of the coaching, right? This is your homework. You do it. But then they discover, oh my gosh, like I didn't want to go to half of those things anyway. I wanted to actually be home in my PJs, or I wanted to go for a walk. And my just instinct is to say yes, because I don't want to miss out. Or I feel like I'll be, excluded or something, some horrible fate is going to fall if I don't say yes.
Yeah.
And what they realize is, what are they saying no to when they say yes to something? Every yes is a no. And they've never paused enough to think about, like, what did I just say no to? I said no to snuggling with my partner, or going for that walk, or that yoga class, or, watching a great movie, or going out with a really important friend, not just one that I thought had business connections.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. And I think, I love the notion of no being a complete sentence, because it's so easy to picture times where you'll say, no, because I needed to do this thing. And like you feel so responsible for there to be a reason, as opposed to like the simple reason is that I don't want to. And
now
that's
it's
okay.
Negotiations, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to give them, now you're negotiating.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we're not negotiating. We're not giving them ammunition to use against us to convince us to do what we always do, which is just give in.
Just give in. Yeah. I think, and the idea that again, the notion of pausing is so interesting to me, because again, it feels like modern life is just, almost like, if there was a control panel for modern life, there would be no pause button. Right? Like,
I love that. Wait, say that again.
If there was a control panel for modern life, there would be no pause button, because it's just not allowed. You can't pause. You have to keep going. And there's so many things to keep us going. Like everything that is designed is to continue doing. And so just the very notion of pressing pause is this radical idea. And then the way you sort of dissect it into kind of the present and the future is really interesting, because I think, we are so wired to barely even acknowledge the future us. So to take a moment to just acknowledge it, and you can still make the same choice. That's the beauty of it, right? You can go, I'm willing to have that headache after the second glass of wine. I'm willing to have it because I'm going to enjoy the feeling and the camaraderie of it. Great. But now it's a choice, not simply you just falling in. So I got to imagine with your clients, and I would say with some of mine too, like these are people who are kind of, go-getters. Like the idea of a pause, does that sort of break their brains?
Well, we think we have to choose productivity or self-care, right? Like and what we're forgetting is when we leverage self-care, we can be more impactful. Yeah. Right. So yes, the idea of a pause, if I phrase the pause again as an experiment, but using the pause as this kind of visual of, let me interrupt the way that I've always been, because the way I've always been isn't working for me anymore. Yeah. I'm tired. I don't have it in me. Like I just can't keep doing this the way I'm doing this. Yeah. And so I have to, I spend a lot of time, and I think you do too, because we talked about this before. My job is granting permission for what is already a birthright. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. It's like abracadabra, kalamazoo, bibbity boppity, bibbity boo, poof. You have permission to take care of yourself. And actually you have an obligation to, not only because the next generation is looking to us for how to adult, right? Yeah. But because we are uniquely suited for the contributions we're meant to make in this world, whatever they are. Yeah. And yet we're damsels in distress because we're neglecting ourselves. Yeah. And so, we're the knight in shining armor that we've been waiting for, and we have to suit up. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting. The idea of coaching itself in some ways can be the first experience of a pause button for people, where it's like, I am suddenly in a space where nobody's asking me to do. It's just show up and let's see where this goes. So like you're in a sense, it's creating that experiment for people, like 1 hour or so every 2 weeks.
I'm pressing pause on my life and looking inward, which is, there's a lot of value in that. It certainly was for me when I first started getting coached myself. I want to circle back to the notion of the work life thing a little bit. We started getting into it a little bit with this experiment of this person who was like, do I even have a life outside of work? I'm working till 9, 10 o'clock every night. But there's this concept that I think we talked about last time, which is interesting, of most of us, we're creating calendars and to-do lists, and we create separate, there's a work thing and there's a life thing, as though those are two distinct entities. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? Like how do you integrate them? Like, how do you get somebody to start to see like, this is all life?
Yes. Oh, I love that you brought this up. This is such a great point. So I introduced the concept of context and considerations. Mm-hmm. And it relates to the pause that we just spoke about. We need to take a moment and think, what is happening in our lives that will impact and influence our capacity? Mm-hmm. We don't think about this. We say yes to something without consulting, like not only our future selves, but our current self, and say, so, all these years that we were in COVID, if you didn't take a moment and say, this is like, COVID is a factor in my life. Mm-hmm. Whether you are actively have COVID at the moment, it is impacting your life. Mm-hmm. If you're taking care of your parents, you have children, young children or older children. If you're in a marriage, something's going on in your relationship. You might be in the middle of a move or the season, right? Mm-hmm. We have to understand what is happening in our lives that will impact what we're able to do. We have to understand what our energy resources are, what our stamina is. And once we consider all these, we can then realistically assess what we're capable of. So I created a planner because I've been addicted to planners since I was a little girl, trying to make sense of the chaos in my life and in my mind. I tried to create order, and I did it through creating a planner. And every year I would buy 3 or 4, and I was like, I don't like this. I like this. Oh, let me, and I finally had to birth my own during COVID. I just couldn't stand it anymore. I needed this tool for myself, and I needed it for my clients because no one else was talking about productivity through the lens of self-care. Through the lens of how can I take care of myself so that I can leave the legacy that I want intentionally, so that I can have the relationships I want, so that I can be present and show up for everyone else because I've shown up for myself, right? That we have an abundance of well-being through good habits, not because we don't know how to say no to anyone else but ourselves. And so and then I created a digital course to support it. And one of the reasons I did that is there are 3 spots in a day where we can identify 3 things that we're going to accomplish for that day. And every week I ask you to go through and say, what's the context and considerations for the week ahead? Oh, okay, my son's going off back to college next week. We're in the middle of a move. Okay, I list it. I've got a big project, and I've got a big speaking gig. I'm onboarding a new client. These are things that I write down. Oh, and it's hot summer weather. This impacts us. We're not thinking about all these. We think about these external forces all the time and let them craft and forge our lives. I'm saying notice them, observe them, see the impact, and then choose. Then make the choice based on, oh, this means that I have an abundance of energy, or boy, the heat really knocks me down. So I'm going to do inside yoga instead of, hot yoga, or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going, we have to, or I'm going to encourage meetings, walking meetings, because it's beautiful weather and pretty soon, it won't be. So let me go enjoy it. These things we want to consider so that we know what our capacity is, and we're intentionally investing our inner resources selectively, discerningly, so that we're living in alignment with reality, first of all, and with our values and our true abilities and reserves.
And there's a lot there. And I think the thing that stands out for me as it relates to the work part of our life is that because we try to segregate that part of our life, even if we're slightly aware of those considerations and the context in our lives, we sort of somehow tell ourselves, well, that doesn't affect work, or that can't affect work. Yeah,
Right.
it might affect my choices after work, but it certainly doesn't allow me to affect work.
Yeah.
As if there is this separate being that emerges when we walk into work who is immune to the effects of those things. So I think that's kind of an interesting way of recognizing that there is a farce to the idea that there is a separate work us and a separate us. And then I was thinking, I started noticing some feelings in my own body as you were talking about this, because you very generously gave me these planners. And what I've noticed is I've looked at them, but I have not used them. And I am very planner resistant. I am almost the opposite of you in the sense that, like, I have occasionally had a planner in my life, and it usually like maybe lasts till like January 12th. Because I'm very much somebody who believes that I'm more of an intuitive liver, and I kind of go and I think, there's probably some part of that which is true for me, and some part of that which is the comfort of the, unconsidered life. And I started to feel a little tension in my gut about the concept of being really deliberate and being really like thoughtful about, what's going on in my life, and then planning my life accordingly.
But they're not mutually exclusive. There can be, I hear that a lot. Like, I'm a creative. I work with a lot of interior designers. I work with a lot of, I'm a creative. It's like, great, let's protect that creativity.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? Yeah. We make choices. You get to choose again. Like you can the night before just say, you know what, I'm feeling drawn to doing this work tomorrow. Like some stuff you got to get done, right? Like this is reality, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe we leave like one of those three things is, I have no idea. Like I have a client who's an architect, and he is, opting out of a ton of the work that he used to do. He doesn't want to do it anymore. And so he wants to build a life outside of work, and he wants to paint. Yeah. And he hasn't had any formal training, but he has this longing for it. And it's like, well, that's one of your three things. Yeah. But the resistance, because the permission piece, the resistance piece is, we're down at this point we're starting out. And this point is, I want you to touch your canvas. Like that's it. Don't do it. Don't pick up a paintbrush. Like, I just want you to touch it. Or other times the homework assignment is, every day do a creative pursuit. Now that could be going for a walk in nature. Like, I think anybody in the creative field has an obligation to infuse themselves with sensory experiences. Like, you have to go to museums, go into nature. Like, that's how we preserve and protect. My interior designers, I'm like, okay, one day a quarter, and I try to do it more often, but that's the most I can get consistently, is one day a quarter. It is a play day. It is a day in service to creativity. And you are not like, you could just touch fabrics all day, but there is no working. And it is fascinating the best ideas come to us in the shower when we're doing all sorts of things that are not so we have to honor that creativity, but sometimes we need a little more scaffolding than the creatives, I say in air quotes, tell themselves, like, oh, don't bind me, but hey, sometimes we need a little skeleton to our creativity, or it all goes down.
I think I'm at the stage, as a person who views themselves as a creative, in general, I am very aware that I need that scaffolding. In fact, I'm very aware that I had that scaffolding in my career as an advertising creative, because it was in the ad agencies I worked at, there was scaffolding there. Yeah. And now I'm working for myself, and I have to create that scaffolding. So I'm very aware of that. What I think the resistance, I think for me, is the simple awareness of, it's uncomfortable to step out of whatever you're used to. You know what I mean? Like, I know there's going to be some feelings I don't want to have when I start to build this scaffolding. And there's going to be parts of me that go, I don't like doing this right now. And that resistance is hard to overcome, particularly if you're trying to do it on your own. I mean, I think that's probably one of the big benefits of having a coach or some support in your life, where there's somebody you can talk to and go, yeah, I tried doing that thing last week and
Yeah.
I did it once and then I was done. How do you find people get through that?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, because expecting that there's no resistance is denial.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think we're like, of course there's resistance?
Yes.
Absolutely. We need to anticipate it and be like, yeah, but resistance doesn't mean you get to tap out.
Right.
Right? It actually means lean in.
Yeah.
When my clients resist something, I'm like, ooh, I've landed on gold. I'm like, woohoo! Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to understand that, like, it's, if we're not doing something, if I've given a homework assignment and a client is resisting, blowing it off, or they did it a little bit and they didn't, it's like, I don't see that as a failure or the wrong assignment. Sometimes I think it's so perfectly the right assignment, right? Yeah. But what I do is see it an opportunity to go, oh, well, we just don't have the right strategy. Right. So if I said to my client, you're leaving work. So I had a client that was like, you were done at 6 o'clock. And then she needed 1 hour on the other side. So like she wanted to have dinner with a partner, but then she wanted 1 hour at the end of the day. And I was like, okay. I took some convincing, but prior to that, we didn't understand that that's what she needed. So I was like 6 o'clock hard stop, and she was really struggling. Which I have no problem with that. Struggle away. You're going to learn a ton when you struggle. Like, I love that. You're going to learn a lot. Yeah. And, we were in constant contact. So I was really understanding what was going on. And it was great insight into the story she had about what I'm a leader and everyone's looking at me and I'm leaving at 6. What am I telling them? I'm lazy. All these things, we got to like look at them and take them out of the shadows and be like, that's ridiculous. Let's like go with that. So, but then we were like, but she was, once we realized we cleared all that, it was like, oh, she kept bumping up the fact she needed time. She needed another hour. And it's like, okay, then let's do it. And then there was no friction because we understood who she was. We honored her need, and we came up with a way to do it that was uniquely her. Yeah. So our life, we need to be able to look at our calendars, whether we're really organized or not, and say, like, I feel seen. A lot of times we don't even exist in our own lives. All it is obligation. Yeah. And no wonder we're resentful. No wonder we're shoveling, chips in our mouths at the end of the day, grinding them with resentment. Yeah. Because like we're invisible. There's a poem by Pavi Mehta that says, do you live in your days like a forgotten ticket stub in someone's jacket?
Oh, geez.
Right?
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
But that's what's happening. And
Very
no wonder we don't have this vitality. We don't have this energy. And we're longingly looking at these other people that have it all together. And we suffer from the comparisonitis, right? There's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me? Right. And it's just, we're comparing our messy insides with everyone else's perfectly packaged outsides. Right. And we're feeling inadequate. Yeah. So what I'm saying is we got to just blow this up completely and check in with ourselves, tune in with ourselves, become curious about ourselves, and see it as a legitimate creative pursuit.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I think that's the message that I've certainly tried to instill with folks I work as well, that working on yourself and working on, how to take care of yourself, become more aware, more self-aware. That is creative, like in the probably the most truest sense of the word, creating yourself. Yes. We do get to kind of create ourselves every day. But we are often living like that ticket stub. So the concept of our lives being a creation almost, it doesn't jive, because we're just like, no, it's not. I'm just living. Like,
reacting.
You are, but what if, all that creative juice that you love bringing to the pursuits that you bring it to, whatever it is, whether it's that architect or working in advertising or being a painter, an interior designer, you can bring that to yourself. And I think of, a lot of the folks, certainly in the advertising world that I work with, I can see that is just blind to them right now. It's like, and there's so much joy and passion in the creation of things outward things,
Yep.
but the inward stuff is just like, there's not even a road that gets you there. There's just like no part of the day allows you to get there, you know?
Well, it's not supported societally, that's for sure.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
the relationship we have with ourselves will outlast all others, like till death do us part. We are in a marriage with ourselves. And if we neglect that partner, that, we neglect that marriage, then we're going to be in constant suffering, whether we know it or not. And so I think it's absolutely, you're spot on. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And it's interesting, as you talked about the sort of well-packaged versions of others that we compare ourselves to. You know, every once in a while I'll catch myself doing that. And then the thing that I try to do to get out of it is I go, who's looking at my social media presence and perhaps having the same thought? Like, and I'll tell myself that I try to be, as authentic as possible and, on social media, but I know like people are not seeing all of this stuff
of course.
From me. And so like that can be a way of waking yourself up and realizing like, that your presence is not quote unquote the full story.
Yes.
What makes you, why do we believe that someone else's presence is the full story? Like, they took a wonderful trip to Tahiti. Great. Remember when you took that wonderful trip to Hawaii a few years ago and everybody was probably going like, that looks nice. And like, and what they're not even seeing is that like, maybe you and your partner had a fight at some point there, or, you hurt yourself on some, activity, or the weather sucked for 3 days straight. Like even the best experiences are filled with things that are less than perfect, but that's not what we're trying to share with the world. So I think there's a lot of value in trying to find a way to break that illusion, because it's obviously an illusion. One of the things though I want to get back to in this idea of planning our lives and, and all that, there's kind of the ultimate, and you talked about this phrase, till death do us part, and death is the scary topic that nobody wants to talk about. Right. And, I started thinking about this idea of like, do we ever we don't really plan for what it means to the fact that we're going to die. And, we don't really think about like, how do we plan accordingly? Like meaning we don't put that into the equation when we're thinking about our lives. And I think I get it. I think, some part of our brain just wants to just not believe that reality. And so we have lots of stories we craft around it. But I think we're also missing out. And I know you believe this too, that it's important to actually like really acknowledge the reality of death and face the mortality, and that can actually benefit us. And, I had a guest on a few months ago named Jody Wellman. She wrote a book called You Only Die Once, which is just a wonderful title. But it's kind of about this topic. And so it's one of these topics that I think we just don't talk about enough in society. Society is kind of meant to put some kind of a visor over us with that. What do you find when you're trying, whether it's for yourself or working with clients, how can we acknowledge the reality of death and have that support us in living a life that is in fact more meaningful and more authentic?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know we touched on this when we met the first time. I think one of the reasons that we stay obsessed with work, or and that's allowing for more consciousness than I think there actually is because we haven't built a life that is more compelling outside of work. And so it keeps us in this perpetual cycle that is, by the way, celebrated by society, right? We get rewards and accolades, and no one just says, wow, you talk to your spouse so kindly, bravo. We don't get points for that, right? So I think this is about building a life so that we leave a legacy that has meaning. That is, that's one of the reasons that I believe our whole purpose for being alive is to wake up. We are asleep and we need to wake up.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that we wake up is by exerting our choice. And Yeah, and intentionally, deliberately choosing what kind of legacy do I want to leave? How do I want to be remembered by the people whose lives I've touched? And you don't, I used to think it had to be grandiose, right? I was going to cure cancer. I was going to do this. I was going to do that.
Yeah.
But it literally just, it can be the interactions that we have with, somebody at the grocery store. And that in and of itself, I watched the power of one tiny exchange and how it can transform a person's life.
Yeah.
So I do believe that we are meant to be role models for other people. I believe that when we give ourselves the permission that we already said is a birthright to take care of ourselves, we are showing and granting permission to everybody else. And we're saying, when that client I referenced to left work at 5:30, she was saying, this is how I'm taking care of myself. You have permission to do the same.
Yeah.
So I think we liberate everybody else from their shackles. When we lead a life that is intentional, we allow other people to see another way. So I've eaten exclusively plant-based for 35 years now. And I can't tell you how much crap, can I say that word? How much, the vitriol that came at me in the very beginning in particular. I mean, it wasn't talked about. People weren't doing it. It was weird. It was like all this stuff. But it was so clear. It was such a part of who I am and what I value that I was unshakable once I got to that point, right? It took a while to get unshakable, but once I got unshakable and I stopped falling for people wanting to enter into debate. Right. They wanted to debate me because they wanted to take me down and to justify their choices. And like, we have to make choices and we have to make authentic, bold choices. And they're not going to, and a lot of people aren't going to like when we take a stand because it threatens their very existence. It threatens their habits. It threatens their choices. When my clients stop drinking for 2 weeks, they get so much pressure from all the people in their lives. They are so uncomfortable because all of a sudden that action is forcing someone else to look at the habits that they want to close their eyes to.
Yeah.
And so I think that is our whole purpose for being, is to authentically really understand ourselves fully and to make intentional, aligned choices with who we are, what we believe, and in doing so, liberate everybody else from doing it. And then if you, like, at the end, when you die, it's like, yeah, I chose this. Like, I chose this life.
Yeah.
And how, like, what a way to go.
Yeah. I mean, I think, God, you hear the stories of people who get to end of life. And, I think that's probably a common regret is that we didn't choose things, we didn't do the things. Yeah. We allowed ourselves to be that ticket stub, and then you sort of become aware of that reality, on your last day. And that's a tough reality to encounter. And I think in some ways, as you were talking about how people then get confronted, whether it's your choice to be plant-based or somebody's choice to not drink for 2 weeks, it almost feels like in some ways, those are like mini points of awareness about our mortality. Like, and I'm not sure I can totally draw the through line, but like somebody's not drinking and then I don't like that because let's just say I'm drinking. And maybe on some level, I thought maybe I should take a pause on drinking. On some level, it's like an awareness of my own lack of choice in my life. And that pushes me to the fast forward button to go like, oh my God, I'm living a life that I'm not choosing. And you got to shut that down. And
shut it down and get busy.
Shut it down is either to shun that person and just go, I don't want to talk to you, or to argue with that person and go, come on, drinking's fun, drinking's cool. And I'm not necessarily anti-drinking. I will drink at times. It's not about that. It's about the choice and our discomfort with the fact that we recognize that we're not choosing. And that's terrifying. And then the thought of that being for the next however many years we have left is really terrifying. So better to block it out.
I mean, we have so little control over most of our lives. Right. And yet we can control what we eat, what we think, what we do. Food thought time. We can control that. And yet we even forfeit that.
Yeah.
And we try to control all the other things that we have no control over. And I often say, like, we're over functioning for everyone else and we're underperforming for ourselves.
Yeah. It's easier though, right? Mentally, it's easier to be like, I'm trying to control all these things out here.
Yeah.
There's problems there because it doesn't say anything about me if, Steve over here is kind of a jerk. And he's ruining my life, right?
Yes, totally.
Like in many ways, that even makes me feel better about my own life because I can elevate myself relative to Steve,
Right.
So I get why we do it. But like you said, if you press pause and you wake up and you realize the lack of choice that's involved in those behaviors and, ultimately the lack of the legacy that we're leaving, what is it if we're just constantly pointing our fingers at everyone else? Because then that just inspires everyone else and that's how it does it versus giving people an option for a different way.
Yep.
And that's a pretty cool gift,
Well, I do think that self-neglect and lack of awareness is selfish.
Yeah.
It's selfish. I mean, not only is it selfish because we're not at our best, whatever that best is for that context and consideration, like what is our capacity in that best in that moment, but also because, it takes a toll on everybody else. Like we have to be pioneers. We have to disrupt the story about how we show up for work and how we show up for our lives. And so the ones that are willing to disrupt what is accepted and celebrated are the people that we need to, we need to be inspired by them and we need to clear the way for them to have the courage that we might not have in the moment, you know, to be like, I think it's our I do think it's a responsibility. And we were talking about the creativity and I loved what you said because I think it's so powerful when you're talking to your clients and say like, what if we reserved some of that creativity that you bring to your work for your own life? Like, what would that be like? That is how we get results. That is how we get transformation. My clients are dramatically transformed in a 6-month window because for a sustainable, in a sustainable way, because when they do these experiments about like, oh, when I eat this, I feel this. And when I go for a walk, I feel this. And when I stop work at this, or when I don't respond to texts in this time, like I feel this, we want to feel good. I think our human state is longing to feel good. And that's why we're grabbing chips and we're grabbing like all these other numbing things because we think it's going to make us feel good. But what makes us feel good is when we understand who we are and then we honor those needs consistently. We feel good then. And then we don't want to deviate. Right. And when we do, it's like, oh, well, I know what's going to happen when I do X. I signed up, I'm accepting the consequences, and then I'm right back on my path. And my husband's a psychiatrist, and he's like, how do you get these results? And it's because I take high achieving people who know how to get things done, and I direct just a percentage of that stamina, energy, and clarity and skill to their own lives. And it's like, oh my God, you have been dispersing this all over the place. And if you're exhausted and depleted and resentful, you have no right dispersing that energy. You have to reserve it, conserve it, and then give. Because you have an overflow of energy. But to give it when you're on fumes is irresponsible.
Yeah, I like that idea of taking responsibility for what we're putting out into the world and being aware that that it has an impact on others.
That's right.
And that it then becomes on us to figure out what is the best version of me that I can put out there that, certainly at the very least isn't tipping people into behaviors that they may not want to do or shouldn't be doing. And hopefully maybe even, like you said, modeling alternative ways of showing up that could be better for that person. And it's not that we have to sort of copy that person's way, but it's almost more like more broadly, you can kind of recognize when somebody has seemed to sort of step into themselves in that way. And I might not be like, oh, I want to follow all of their their habits, but I'm really inspired by somebody who seems to have found a way to not be caught up in the current of everything else that the rest of us are. They have somehow seemed to appear that they're a little bit above it, or they're managing it in some way that's different.
They've studied themselves. I think that's the point of differentiation. They become curious about themselves, and they invest in that relationship with themselves. And once you know yourself, it's like, it's so much easier to do what you need to do, because it's just, like I said, we want to feel good. So it starts with that moment of a cup of tea where you actually learn how to sit in your own company, right? How do I stay in my own company for just 5 minutes without the distraction? Because, that is a lesson we don't know how to do. We don't know how to be with ourselves.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's crazy to me that we don't. It just seems really strange. Like, it feels like we should be able to do that.
Yes.
But clearly there are incentives societally and maybe biologically that push us away from that at times. So I love that you're helping people to see a different path. And I know I'm trying to do that in my own way, and others are trying to do it. I want to come to a few final questions as we wrap up here. And we've talked a lot about people, how they show up at work, and maybe more broadly that there's just this general sense of like, I need to do, and there's this sense of overwhelm, all this stuff that shows up in the workplace. If you could wave a magic wand and create a more fully desuckified world of work for people, what would it look like?
Yeah, I love this question. So what I would want to see is that self-expression is more celebrated instead of conformity. That is a really important piece. And I think an environment, if expected to be working in a space, an environment that actually soothes the senses, I think is an absolutely essential thing. An environment that, is nourishing, which is not something we ever think about. Like, how do we soften those rough edges that, that inevitably, we bump up against along the way? So I think the environment needs to be intentional and thoughtful and nourishing and humane. And I think there needs to be a culture of, we expect you to understand who you are, when you best work, how you best work. And what I would love is for everyone, and I have my clients do this, create a manual or a one manual about like, this is when to reach me. And these are my, this is my criteria for when I have meetings. Like how many meetings do we have that could have been an email? Like, so again, all coming from self-awareness, like, wow, like I'm not going to have a meeting at 4:00. Like I'm not going to be at my best. Yeah. So don't not available then. Yeah. Right. Like we have to know who we are and then bring that awareness and do our best to build our work life, our personal life around that, not to correct ourselves and fix ourselves, right? Yeah. Not change ourselves because we're broken, but actually like, how could I maximize my sense of well-being as well as my impact? And we're not thinking about that. We're not saying, how can I protect that well-being so that I can have an impact? So let's have food that's healthy in the workplace to say like, it matters what you eat. We're paying for your creativity at an ad agency. So we're going to help you feed your creativity in a way that enables it to see clearly, to have the stamina that we need and expect from you. Yeah. So it's a matter of tactical and it's a matter of mindset.
A couple things in there jumped out at me. One is the space, and I think about it from my own space, and I'm always thinking about how to make my own space better. But I think about the places I've worked, and I don't think any of them live up to what you've just described. No. I mean, in many ways, you use the word humane, and then I think about so many places where it feels like you're in a pen, know. And then you talked about the hard edges, and I can literally picture the hard edges of these cubicles and things like that, and how, God, even some of the furniture, it's like hard. I'm looking at the cushy looking couch in the background you have there, and I'm thinking like, that would be really nice in an office environment. But I've never seen that. So like, it's remarkable. It almost seems like the work environments are designed deliberately with the hard edges and with the, inhumane characteristics, because it's feeding off of that very old school industrialist model, which is to say you almost have to shave the edges off of human beings to make it work. You have to have them become more machine-like. And so that's really fascinating to me. The idea of self-expression is one that I love. I think we all would do better just in life, the more we could feel comfortable expressing ourselves. And that connected me to this idea of the manual or the wool manual. I love that. And it made me wonder, a lot of companies will give you the employee handbook or something like that. This is like whatever. And most of those are, unreadable. But let's just say, let's say you put I think there could be value in doing that the right way, meaning putting together this is who we are. And that could speak to things like values and how we want everyone to show up and what we celebrate here and what we value here. Yep. But it would be wonderful at a place where it's like, here's your book. And then here's a thing where you can create your version that we all get to understand. So that because we don't understand anybody we work with, really. We don't have those opportunities to know.
They're means to an end. I mean, that's often how they're just means to an end. And,
exactly. To give people a chance to express who they are, how they like to work, how they like to be talked to, how they when they're most productive. And then this is where it gets tricky, right? For a company to embrace that is such a mindset shift from sort of what I've noticed is a lot of the companies basically doing it's return to work and it's you're here for these hours at this exact time and everything has to be kind of like it was, as though we are all the same. That's right. There is going to be some tension and some feelings in our bodies that we don't like as we try to implement this. So what I would say to anybody who's even interested in this is to just recognize that and be willing to embrace that and actually to realize that's actually probably a good signal that there's some resistance to your point earlier. And then to be okay, maybe having some support with that process, to the idea that you can simply do that alone and just say, I'm going to now create a workspace that is more humane and is more comfortable for people and allows people to express themselves and share who they are and how they like to be. It's hard to do that on your own. Nobody knows how to do that on their own.
Yeah. But I think what you're talking about is we talked about the scaffolding, right? And I think what's happening is companies are creating so much scaffolding that it's suffocating. Mm-hmm. And that leads to rigidity. Yeah. And it also leads to rebellion. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like if I say to a client, if I give them really, really strict homework, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll do this, right? Because I want to see what happens and we want to do it as an experiment, but it's, we'll rebel, right? I have to find this, and I know you know this in coaching, you have to find that sweet spot where you've got enough structure before you trigger a toddler tantrum. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And that's what's happening. I think we're having tantrums because it's like, we're not all the same. Mm-hmm. And not only that, we're not the same as we were. We have been impacted through context and considerations. COVID has changed us. It has 1,000%. Changed our relationship with work. It has changed, and to deny that is delusional. So how can we actually think about the home environment and the work environment occupies a massive part of the work that I do with my clients, and I underestimated it. I'm super sensitive to my environments, and they can support me or they can undermine me. And I help my clients go drawer by drawer. We go through this stuff because who are you? How much do you need around you? What? And again, this is all coming from self-awareness. Yeah. And the business model and the work model in the corporate world has very disinterest and disregard and disdain for self-awareness, or self in general.
Yeah, no, you're right. It kind of sublimates self,
Yeah, self doesn't belong in the we,
You talked about the drawers, and I'm sitting here with a drawer in front of me, and I'm like, oh, it kind of is a good metaphor for the idea of self-awareness, meaning I open this drawer to get something out of it, and I close it as quickly as I can because I don't want to notice the chaos in my drawer. And I think that's a pretty good metaphor for our own awareness. Like, yeah, well, I'll know what I need to know, and then I'm not looking. So,
well, congratulations, you are a human being, because this is the human state. This is the human condition, and we need to bring some intention and introspection to it. Yeah,
and I'm now motivated, so I'm gonna actually rip the Band-Aid off and spend at least a minute looking at this drawer just to see. Motivation
is a fickle lover and an unreliable source of energy. But if it helps you, go for it.
I am going to try it. I am going to try it. You talk a lot about sensory experiences. I like to involve a sensory experience to my show, which is sound effects. You've probably heard them when you've listened. There's lots of cat sounds and some other sounds interspersed. So I am inviting you to contribute to that with your own desuckified sound effects. You have something you'd like to add to the mix?
I have two, but one I think you're not going to allow, because the first one, the sound I want is silence. I want no sound.
I like that.
My other one is sipping tea, the sound of sipping tea, a slurping, sipping tea. But I really feel like I am craving for my clients, and I think we all have this deep hunger for silence. Even though we're terrified of it, I think it is an oxygen that we need to take in, and we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to tolerate it, but we've got to learn to sit in it.
Yeah, no, it is at times painful to sit in it. I get it, Quick question. Are you willing to try to make the tea slurping sound so that I can?
Hang on. Is that it?
I think I got enough there. Yeah, that'll work.
Okay. I tried to sip with my water, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think I'll find a way to incorporate both of those thoughts in the sound of the slurping, and then I may find a way in our intro to just put a little silence and just see how people react to that, because I think that could be really just a fun little experiment to see.
And well, it's the space between the pause and, it's on the pause button. It's the space between the present self and the future self. That's what we're capturing.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Yeah. So you've shared so many wonderful things, and I want people to be able to dive deeper and explore what you do. How can people find you online and connect with your work?
So you can certainly find me on LinkedIn and also benourished.com. So it's the letter B as in human being, BNOURISHED, benourished.com. And people who are interested in learning more can schedule a complimentary session. And I really just invite the conversation and invite anybody to start renegotiating their relationship with self-care and with themselves in general.
I love that. I think you've definitely opened my eyes to some things during this conversation, and I imagine you're opening many eyes with the work you do. And I am grateful for the work you do, because I think it's some of the most important work we all should be doing. So thank you, Katie.
I think some of your questions are the most thought-provoking. It's clear you are doing the work and you're bringing it to all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, Katie, it was really fun chatting with you, and I'm sure we'll chat again. But for now, have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. And a huge thanks to Katie for bringing love, light, and a deep understanding of humanity to the show. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share, rate, review, subscribe, or consider raising a flock of carrier pigeons and training them to deliver messages that threaten an unholy unleashing of poop if they don't listen to this show on the reg. You can follow Katie on LinkedIn and check out her site at benourished.com. It'll grab you from the first headline. For doers mastering how to be. I think we can all relate to that. I bet some of you can relate to my site and my Substack newsletter as well. I'm on a mission to make work suck less, and I'd love for you to join me. Want to make that desuckification happen ASAP? Let's set up a free half-hour strategy session. Bye, everyone.